Three great speakers, all similarly sized, but each with their own sonic characteristic. These are all small bookshelf speakers. They all have small mid-bass drivers. They all have a fairly compact cabinet dimension, but they all blew me away with the output that I got out of them. They all sounded bigger than what I expected. And when I say bigger, I don't mean that they compete against floor standing speakers. They don't. Nor do I think they are full range speakers. I just mean that if you are dismissing these small speakers because you don't think that they could deliver the sort of output that you would want, I'm here to tell you that they can, especially if you're not trying to fill a giant room. Mine is 12 feet wide by 10 feet deep. It's open on the right side because that's where the kitchen is. It is a fairly small room, and the amount of output that I got from each one of these speakers was surprising. Here's the rundown of the speakers. Starting off with the SVS Ultra Evolution Nano. It's got a 1-inch tweeter with a 5¼ woofer, a 1.6-inch flared rear firing port. It's got a frequency response of 44 Hz to 40 kHz. Nominal impedance is 6 ohms. Sensitivity is 85 decibels. It measures just a hair over 12 inches high, 7.5 inches wide, and 9.5 inches deep, and it retails for $8.99 US. It is the smallest speaker of the Ultra Evolution speaker lineup. You can use them as part of a home theater setup, which is what I did. I had them as fronts and rears with a fairly large center speaker and two SVS 3000 micros. Also is the Acoustics 5010, a 1-inch tweeter with a 4.5-inch mid-bass driver, a bass reflex port around the back. Frequency response is 56 Hz to 30 kHz. Nominal impedance is 6 ohms with a minimum of 3.3. Sensitivity is 86.3 decibels. They measure 10.4 inches high, 6.3 inches wide, and 10.4 inches deep, and they retail for $7.49 US. The 5000 series is pretty standard with 2 floor standers, 2 bookshelves, and a center speaker. And lastly is the Totem Loon. You get a 1-inch tweeter with a 5.75-inch woofer. Frequency response is 51 Hz to 26 kHz. Nominal impedance is 8 ohms with a sensitivity of 87 decibels. These measure 10.75 inches high, 6 inches wide by 8 inches deep, and they retail for $12.99 US. The Loons are a standalone speaker, meaning there are no matching speakers for this. Though if you were smitten, you could probably buy 3 pairs and have a center, surrounds, and a back speaker. Powering these speakers was the Cambridge Audio Evo 150, the Marantz Model 50, and the Yamaha AS1200. My sources were the CXN V2, the Apple TV 4K. Backing up all of these speakers and filling in that low end is the SVS 3000 Micro. And I say filling in that low end because spec sheets be damned, these are still compact bookshelf speakers, and there is a limit to what they can achieve. And so a subwoofer is definitely required if you want your music to truly sound full range, and if you listen to a lot of electronic music like I did, if you want some bass, get a subwoofer. And of course, if you wouldn't mind liking this video, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell icon for notifications and all those good things, I would really appreciate it. Cheers. In the looks department, I think the battle between each one of these speakers really comes down to your own personal preference. What do you like looking at? The SVS Ultra Evolution Nano comes in a black ash, a black piano gloss, and a white gloss. My sample came in the white gloss. It's got a white grille. The front baffle is time aligned so that each driver reaches you at the same time. It's well put together, but it's pretty standard as far as speakers go. And of these 3 speakers, the SVS is aesthetically my least favorite. The Acoustics 5010 is available in black, in white, oak, and rosewood. This is the most design forward of the trio. It's got rounded corners, a black acrylic front baffle with matte rubber surrounding the drivers. The binding posts are flat, the finish is really nice. This feels like the most forward-thinking and considered of the trio. The Totem Loon, it comes in black, walnut, and white. My review sample arrived in walnut. This is the most classic looking of the trio. It's a pretty retro looking speaker. Out of them all, I gravitate towards the 5010. I think it looks awesome, especially in the oak finish. But a very close second is the Loon. There's something easy and reassuring with the retro aesthetic of the Totem Loons. You are paying for it though. Now, the reason that I am doing this video in particular is when I did first connect any one of these speakers, it was after coming off of a much larger speaker. And when I expected the sound to sound much smaller in comparison to the speaker that I was previously listening to, it just didn't. It sounded really big, sounded really full, and I wasn't missing too much of the overall sound if I was not nitpicking the sound. And starting things off with some drum and bass and the SVS Ultra Evolution Nano, it has the deepest frequency response on paper. And I'm not going to lie to you and say that they sounded subwoofer deep with that 44 Hz extension, but I will say that they did sound bigger and fuller than I expected them to. Now you can make these speakers sound perceivably bassier or at the very least boomier by shoving them up against a wall, but I do find that they sound tighter and cleaner, about a foot away from the front wall. Some say you can pull them out even further, but in my room, it just becomes part of the center of the living room, and my listening experience on my couch is compromised for that. I feel like a foot away from the front wall gives them enough distance for them to sound perfect to my listening ears, or to my ears in my listening position. You know what I meant. Listening to Ordinary from Bungle, this is such a wonderful tune, and one of the reasons I pull out this tune for speakers is it's got a very strong kick with a bit of a pop. It's got so much character, and when this kicks in, it's got some really nice rides and highs, and a really nice deep musical bass line. And on the Ultra Evolution Nanos, it rendered a lot of that tune for me. It had a lot of depth, a lot of musicality, the drums were nice and punchy. It sounded very tall and wide, and it wasn't a very localized sound, which was inherently different than the Acoustics 5010s. That speaker was a bit more focused in sound, and if I had them towed away from my ears, it was a bit more expensive, but it sounded better and a bit more direct when I had them towed in towards my listening position. And that speaker, even though it has a smaller 4.5-inch mid-bass driver, it counters with a far deeper speaker cabinet, and I feel like it compensates for this and sounds just as big as the Nanos. The Totem Loons threw out the widest soundstage out of all of these speakers, and they also managed to dig just as deep, and this throws me for a loop every time I connect these speakers because I just don't expect these tiny speakers to put out this much sound. And if you want a speaker that you can just set up and not worry about, not futz with, don't worry about toe-end, put it on your speaker stand, your media unit, your sideboard, bookshelf, this is the speaker to get. In my review, I remember I was not worried about sitting on my couch. I was sitting on the left side, the right side, the center, on the floor. I was turned away from the speaker. It sounded great even when I was in the adjacent kitchen cooking. It sounded great pretty much everywhere, and I didn't really have to worry about where I was in relation to the speaker. Whereas with the 5010s, if I'm not directly in front of the speakers, it doesn't sound as good. If I am dancing around my kitchen, it sounds night and day different than when I am sat in front of the speakers. And with the Ultra Evolution Nano, it's sort of the same thing. It's not as focused, but it's not as broad and wide as the Totem Loons. All of these sonic characteristics do carry forward even when I switch genres, though there are some different notes here. Listening to Kenny Burke's Rising to the Top, on the Ultra Evolution Nanos, it does feel like tone controls are engaged even though they're flat on the amplifiers. It just sounds a bit richer tonally. It sounds like his voice has a bit more depth to it. There's a bit more sparkle in the highs. And when I switch over to the 5010s, the sparkle is there, the directivity is there, but they do sound a bit more forward and less boosted down low. And when I switch over to the Totem Loons, they sound a little more laid back. But I will readily admit that this laid back nature could just be in my head. It's a retro looking speaker, so maybe the aesthetics are making me think it's a bit more laid back and it's just not. Really, I'm splitting hairs and I'm looking for differences here, but there really aren't too many. The thing that changed the most though for me was amplifier pairings. The Cambridge Audio Evo 150 sounded its best with the Ultra Evolution Nanos. That amplifier just took that boosted sound off of those speakers and made it sound a lot more natural. And then conversely, the 5010s didn't sound as great on that as it did on the Marantz Model 50. That amplifier, that warmer sound of that amplifier, made those speakers sound less forward, less directed, and they made it sound fuller and more in line with the Ultra Evolution Nanos and the Totem Loons. And the Totem Loons, I think, sounded best on the Yamaha AS1200. It sounded fuller, less laid back, it had a bit more sparkle up top, and when I was listening to something a bit cheesier, Green Eyes from Coldplay, I don't know why I like that song so much, but I do, the acoustic guitar and his weird-ass voice, it sounded top to bottom great, and that would be my amplifier pairing for each one of these speakers. And I can only speak from my small sample size of one perspective in my smallish room, but there isn't a massive gulf of difference between all of these speakers. They all have slightly individual characteristics, but they all sound great, and I think any one of these would serve you well. Now, If you are watching this video in hopes that I pick an eventual winner out of these 3 great speakers, well, here we go. If you're looking for a great dual purpose speaker, both music and movies, Ultra Evolution Nano, that wins the day, especially in home theater with my review package where it was Nanos as the fronts, Nanos as the rears, giant center speaker, 2 SVS 3000 micros. That was exceptional. I have no complaints about that speaker package whatsoever. And it also happens to sound great for music. The 5010s also sound good, but they do have a more focused sound in my space, and it's ditto for that center channel. And I think this is more of a case of my space letting me down more than those speakers letting me down. I think if I had a bigger space and I had more space between me and the speakers, then I would get a bit more expansiveness out of them, and I can't wait to move to test that out. But then, the speaker that I love the most out of all 3 of these is the Totem Loons. And the reason I love it the most is it's easy to live with. I don't have to futz with setup, I can connect it to anything, and I can put it anywhere. And I forgot to mention, it sounds great near field too. So I can have it on my desk, in my living room, in my bedroom, connected to any sort of amplifier. It sounds great. Couple that with a retro aesthetic and the fact that it's Canadian made, it wins for me. Thanks for watching.